discussion context today, and thank you. One thread as folks are arriving is we can connect to the what was shared previously as well in terms of the flows document. But I also feel like it would be helpful to think through the roadmap between here and where we have a version that we'd be comfortable sharing. And I don't know if that's something that folks have thought further on. We'll have other colleagues join here in a few minutes, but I guess Quad, do you have a sense of where we are in that meta map of process? If we think about the sort of MVP of shareable destination.
Well, last time we discussed, we have a general idea of what we want to achieve. Whether how long until we get there, that's up for discussion. And take this little step at a time and see where we get there.
I support that. Yeah, I wasn't speaking to any question of when. I was speaking to a question of what are the major areas that we need to be completed before a very first version we share with external partners. And I'm not saying that I know how long those areas take. I'm just trying to get a sense of whether we have a map of what those areas are. And hi, Ninad, welcome.
Hello, hi Bobby, hi everyone.
Quad, in your sense, we probably have we know what areas we would need to have in order to be able to share it, or do we have that? Is that not something that you think we could say at this point?
Yes, I do say that we have something in mind. What is our goal? What is a minimum viable to deliverable products that we can share? The roadmap that is on PowerPoint that Jenna and the team put up the last time. This is ultimately, after we went through that roadmap, I think we reached a minimum viable product that we can share to external parties.
Got it. Okay, so that's terrific. So the roadmap that we are already working on already has all of the categories needed to get between here and a minimal viable version we can share with external parties. That's terrific. So happy to support that process. Let me hand over to if Jenna or Tuka or Kwa, if y'all on behalf of project management want to help us get oriented. I'm happy to support the processes y'all think would be helpful.
Yeah, and I just want to, I don't know if maybe my versioning or perspective is different. So I guess, Kwa, I'm not sure exactly what you were referencing. As far as, I guess, the process, or I guess it's the MVP, the Excel spreadsheet that we've been working on.
I'm not sure if Kwa can hear, but I think
I can hear you.
Oh, go ahead, Kwa.
So I was referring to this matter. May I share the screen?
Sure, go ahead.
If you can see what I'm sharing right now, the PowerPoint project structure template. Are we looking at the same thing, or?
Yes.
Yes. So this is what I'm looking at as a minimum viable deliverable products. Over here, we got our financial models. If we reach stage 3, where our financial model incomplete, is have a base model. That makes sense. A data supported model. So that model is now back up with the data from the data team, and also is have scenario analysis in it. So we can now have parameters set into this model. I don't know if it's in an Excel form, or is it a Power BI form, or is some sort of way that we can put scenario parameters in there. So until we reach this stage, then yes, I believe this stage is where we can feel comfortable with sharing this to external parties and have them take a look at it, dissect it however they want, and yes.
Okay. And is the rest of the scenarios, that something that we can do? I know we have Tuesday evening or Eastern evening meeting. So is that something where we can set the scenario analysis, set the expectation?
For the scenario analysis this last week, I took a look at what would be some, like crisis scenarios, and was able to pull a lot of data from Zillow. For me, it would be helpful if anybody can help with a good place to put that data, because it's large, and I can work with it with my products, but it'd be good to have a good place. And that would support, I guess I'm looking at the data supported middle column and scenario analysis far right column on this model that you just pulled up. And we could cover that Tuesday.
Okay.
If you see, Jenna put it a lot of folders in there. Well, that's echo. Might as well create a different folders for what's it called? For Sue's data. I mean, Sue, you have more the experience on me in this. Where do you think would be best to store your work? Is it a folder on Google Drive, or how do you want to share it out to the teams? And Nina, feel free to chime in. I know you have data background also.
I can put in a folder, but I'm kind of thinking that, maybe Ninat or somebody else could help with the actual raw data I pulled out. I pulled out of Zillow, and there's just a ton of data. So I'm working right now with Access and with Excel, and it takes forever to load, to run. And so if there would be another database platform that somehow we could all access, or another way of accessing the data, that would help me. And we could talk about that Tuesday. What's the best way to do that?
Yes,
Bobby?
let's discuss it on Tuesday. Google Drive is the first good place to start with. And
Okay.
there are few other websites. One of them is data.world, where they allow projects to upload data and work on them simultaneously. Let me show a demo on Tuesday, and let's see what the team thinks about it.
That'd be great.
Thanks, Nina. And Bobby, feel free to chime in if other team had already some tools that crowd sourcing prefer to use. If not, then we talk with Nina some more.
We have inquiry from the medicinal foods folks for Tableau, but we're still trying to figure out whether they are charging per seat or whether we have a license for all volunteers from one license. Because if it's per seat, it's not very scalable, but if it's one license for everybody, that's fine. So that's been a process. Likewise, we have GitLab in other teams established as a code repository, and we've gotten on Azure in some teams, and in the past we've also used AWS and can also connect again. But the consideration is just to figure out a platform that doesn't charge us per person per month, so that it's not so that we can extendably use it as more people join. I think that would just be the meta criteria, because we do hope to include more colleagues over time and collaboration, and we want them to be able to access it as well. And then also just consideration of, do we have the backup of it, or do we have access to it if the platforms change? We don't want to get our data orphaned if the rules of the platform change, etc. So there's just consideration for how do we ensure we have memory of it. But yes, I think that's great, and it's exciting to see it come together. I see Bassem unmuted. Did you want to comment, Bassem?
Yes. For the data visualization program, I think Power BI is free license. However, you will not able to publish the outcome via internet. So we can share it, the file, we can send the file, we can do whatever we want, but we will not have a public site at internet. And
Right now, we're not putting this to the public. Right now, we're creating this for internal use. At some point in the future, we will need to figure out what is the part of this that we want to communicate for the public. But we haven't even figured out in this context. I mean, if you communicate this to the public in the wrong way, it doesn't necessarily help. I mean,
Yeah.
we don't want to get anyone to say this is real and exists and is available to them until that's real and is true and is available to them. So in principle, we could talk about how we think it should be every person's right to own any fraction of the appreciation value of a house that they choose and not have this everybody buy the whole house and get into debt for 30 years as the exclusive structure by which we afford housing in the US. It may work in, let's say, the lowest cost of housing markets in the US. The 30-year mortgage, I think, probably works better in some states than others. You know, it's not all the case that there's a shortage, a scarcity of land in every place in the country. There are cities that have sprawl. There are cities that have exurbs and that have that don't have natural constraints. But where we know that homelessness is real and prevailing and damaging is in these parts of the country where there are major barriers of water and mountains and constraints. There are also long-term growth cycles that mean that every year we've produced too few houses compared to the number of people, and where that has created a situation where even the houses we have produced are out of reach by the people that need them most. And we can see that at the level of overboarding, which is the term for people who have too many people living in a unit compared to what's healthy according to the government. There's statistics about overboarding in every city. So you can take some of the overboarded population and consider how do they relate to the underboarded population. The underboarded population are basically owning too much house compared to their needs. Or, you know, and it's not saying that anything is taken away from them. It's just saying that that is preventable. When that is true because people die or move away, okay, maybe that's not preventable. But when it's when it's true from the beginning of when they buy the house, when, you know, we have families of 2 buying, you know, 6-bedroom houses and families of 8 squeezing into studios, you end up with those risks. You end up with supercommuting, and you end up with downstream, you end up with family homelessness. So I think what we're saying is, you know, we don't want to communicate to everybody in the country that this can solve every kind of homelessness all the time. I mean, we're not talking about a panacea here. What we are talking about is a entirely preventable injustice in major economic regions and centers of gravity. New York, Bay Area, Seattle, other regions like that, where it's, you know, the tragedies that we can't do anything about, they're one thing. But the tragedies that are entirely preventable, you know, then that's a question of, can we figure out the collective agency to secure the promise of preventability? And I think the promise of preventability of homelessness, supercommuting, and overboarding is real. And even just creating secure housing that doesn't create mental health crises with communities because they're insecure in housing, that's real too. You know, the stability of families and communities because they have long-term access to secure housing. The difference between what Stanford offers their professors and what you have with these commercial groups is a lot of the commercial groups, you know, either create risk for the people to lose their house or don't provide enough value add as to create housing access for anybody who wouldn't have already had it in the first place. So what we're talking about is, can we provide this balance between giving people the part of appreciation value that they ought to get while providing absolute security of access to the house for the family across that generation based on the same kind of protections that you would provide if you really, really care about the stakeholders. And you know, universities have problems, but one thing they do really well is they built contracts to really, really care about tenured faculty, right? Like it's one thing that, you know, I don't fault them for, right? I think they do. I think they've done that importantly well. So I think what we're saying is, can we raise the standards of appreciation value financing of housing access for everybody who's not a tenured professor to still be able to get that wonderful balance of completely secure access to housing while the closer to the proportion of the appreciation value that they actually wish. So that's the way I would connect that together, and that's what we can show at the MVP, right? I mean, I think that's what we're working towards. Are there any questions about that framing of this?
I was going to ask the team next Tuesday to have a look at my question at Power BI, but since Kwa is here and you raised a question about the license, I'd like to share my screen and ask my question because you and Kwa is here. Can I? May I?
Sure.
Hi, Bobby. At the
Hi,
meantime,
Zakai, welcome.
uh,
Sorry, we were in mid-sentence when you arrived, but welcome. My apologies, we didn't greet you.
oh, no, it's okay. I was thinking about what you just said. Can you just elaborate a little bit more about why you think that the other programs are not providing secure enough housing for the people, or why they are creating more risk?
Well, I'm saying there are some of them that are creating more risk, where under certain circumstances you could lose the house, and there are others of them that are not necessarily creating more risk, but are rather not providing housing access to people in 50% to 250% of AMI who wouldn't already have it before. In other words, they're serving a market who could afford to buy a house without their help. So they're providing some value, perhaps, some flexibility, perhaps, but they're not helping anyone who wouldn't have already been housed.
So you're saying that they only provide housing option for those who originally able to buy the house, but this time they only lowered the financial burden to buy it.
Right. I mean, in other words, landed is benefiting a tiny percentage of people who are just on the border of being able to afford the house. They're only helping with 5%. They're only helping with 5% of the total house value, maximum ever, total ever. Right? So if a person is 95% of the way towards being able to afford a house and all they need is the last 5%, then okay, landed could be a bridge. And that I think applies to 2% of the population or 1.5% of the population, right? Like there is a small percentage of people who really could be served by that. Now, in the case of landed, they're not serving that whole population. They're only serving, teachers in this jurisdiction or nurses in that jurisdiction or whatever, right? And so they're really helping, particular jurisdictions get those who are almost housable housed by helping them get the last percent over the line. But they're not helping with anybody who's further away than 95% of the way there. That's a gap, right? And Unison is also not helping in a lot of the people that benefit from Unison are not people who wouldn't have been able to afford a house anyways. It's not necessarily targeted in that way. So I think there's a question of additionality. Additionality is, but for our action, what would happen? And the point is, it's not necessarily clear that that Unison's customers are more likely to be in the middle class because they're Unison customers. And what we mean by functional middle class is they have a level of cost of their housing that does not put them in perpetual poverty, right? And we think that's possible at appreciation value financing, and we don't see Unison or Landed as putting people from at risk of poverty, at risk of homelessness, and with other risk factors of supercommuting, et cetera, we don't see them getting a transformational leap for a population. We see landed making a difference for the very marginal, tiny population that's almost there in a tiny number of parts of the country that are not growing at an exponential pace. So it's going to take us, I mean, over the next 30 years, they would get to something, but it would still be small. Even if they just keep with that model, it's going to remain in perpetuity small. So what we're talking about is a process that could, in theory, scale to the scope of the problem. Bassem, did you want to share that? Sorry, my apologies.
That's okay. Are you seeing my screen now?
Yes.
Okay. My question is, when I was studying the percentage of homes swept by year, I found it represented with a chart like that. So it increased 2% every year until year 6. Then it increased by 3%, and at year 19 it reached the cap of 75%. Is I don't know, is that what that
So you're saying that at the beginning we don't have the money to make it a full 75%, but you're effectively simulating two phases. Maybe if you differentiate it, one phase is like full operation, and at that point we can do up to 75%. And then there's a phase before that where we start with 50-50 perhaps, and then work our way up to 75% over time.
So this is our goal, to reach to that cap.
Well, we think at 75%, the estimates we've seen are that half of those who become family homeless could have afforded to buy a house had they had quadruple in income at a prior point in time. Before they become so homeless that they lose their jobs and become riddled with other problems, traumas, etc. They could have afforded to buy a house had they had quadruple the income. So we're trying to get them quadruple the income at the point in their life cycle before they've gotten homeless, where they could therefore become... Hi, Mark. Mark, we've got this interesting document here from Bassem. I wanted to get your feedback on it, if that's possible. But I can't hear Mark.
See if I can get my microphone going, Bobby. Sorry to be late.
No worries. All good. The question I was going to ask, Mark, is this: we have a ramp up in this, in terms of the percentage of our homes that we are making available at 75%. Well, like, i.e., the person could buy a house if they had quadruple the income. At what point in our rollout are we offering that? And at what point are we only offering 50-50, like we're co-buying it, like Stanford, or even earlier, like 25-75, where they have 75% of the way and we're helping with 25%. I think what's being identified here is a sort of prospective ramp up that is being identified in terms of how we consider that ramp up of when do the rules change for us.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's interesting theoretically. In the world of housing trusts, the maximum that the trust can own is 50%.
Housing trusts? You mean like land trusts?
Yeah, like land trusts that hold housing as opposed to preservation of land type trusts.
And why is it 50% for them?
Really, I'm learning more about that as we do it in East Palo Alto, Bobby. The Housing Trust Fund movement is a national movement. I think the status of the co-ownership changes if the trust, or well, for us would be the hold company, owns more than 50%. I will try and get you the exact legal documentation. But on the other hand, I still think this is interesting. I think it's interesting to see in terms of the strength of the financial hold company, at what point, if we were in the place of Stanford University, we might be able to offer somebody the 100% use of a home for 25% of the sales price of the home.
Well, let me ask. I mean, could you do it as? I mean, yeah, that's the question. Because like, if there's a well, let's find out on the restriction beyond 50/50. Because
good.
If we can get all the way to 75/25, then fully half of family homelessness is preventable. But suppose we can only get to 50/50, then the status of the home changes. Well, so what if the status of the home changes from the perspective of, suppose they go to 25% and the holdco owns 75%, but instead of charging them rent, it's just holding for appreciation value purposes, right?
Right. Well, but what you have to still do a transaction with the deed if they're really going to be owners. So it's not, it's usually the solution of people who don't have either the down payment or the access by borrowing funds to the 100% transaction. Usually their default is a rental relationship, right? And
Right.
what they get is, for that rental relationship, they get 100% of the use of the home, and they don't pay property taxes, and then it's by agreement whether they pay the utilities or not. And the housing may or may not be affordable to them. Part of the problem that we're seeing, and I'm sure it's true in Seattle and New York as well as in the Bay Area, is that as we create high-paying jobs, we create high rents. And so that's where the poverty comes in, and that's where the displacement comes in.
So look, I think
So
at a compliance level, we need to find out what's possible. But then at a
That's right.
at a level, from a theory point of view, the reason why we prefer them buying than renting is because they're accruing an asset, they're building an asset over time, and they're building security in that secure
Right, and
asset.
this is the great yes, Bobby, and this is the great social justice story of our day. I mean, this is what the book The Color of Law is all about. When people came home from World War II, they either could or could not borrow money. And they could or could not live in whatever neighborhood they wanted to. And that was all driven by race. And so the whole generation of my parents' generation that increased their wealth and passed it down was an advantage that wasn't shared by families of color. So we're living in a world that was shaped by federal policy over the last 100, 110, 120 years that was all driven by race prejudice.
Well,
and so that's part of what our poverty problem has to do with.
Right. I think this is a way to create upward mobility across demographic diversity dimensions.
That's right.
And it's potentially...
That is correct. Absolutely.
It's
sure.
potentially promising. Is there other feedback on what Bassem has shared in terms of the... Oh, Bassem, tell us what we're seeing here, first of all.
Well, this is again by selling property, probability of home and of home sale and probability of home sale adjusted for 100%. So I have a couple questions. This is sum of probability 1, but sum of probability 100% cap is almost 0.64, and there is fluctuation here, and ends with some numbers like going to arrive to 0. And
wait, so help me understand what we're seeing here. So the fluctuations are from real data about the real
Yes.
world, or this is from we've
From
put an
the model,
algorithm into this?
from the Excel sheet, this Excel sheet.
Got it. So you've
It's
taken the Excel sheet and you've built it into the
yes,
simulator.
yes.
Okay, so let me ask: is this something that Kwa? Have you already seen this part? Are you up to speed on this?
No, I'm not, and it's very impressive to see.
It's very interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
Very
Uh-huh.
exciting. So help us walk us through what's happening here. Bassem, help us understand step by step what we're seeing. Then I think you're speaking of it in a way that's really exciting to understand. But just help us walk us through it step by step to
Okay.
make sure we're
Can you
understanding exactly
maximize
what
the
we're at
size
with
of it also, Bassam?
Okay, I will maximize it. And this is year one. And again, by selling probability of home sale is 1%, and it increased in year 2 to 3%. Year 4 is 7%. Year 5 is 8%, and suddenly in year 7 is 3%. Year 10 is 8%. Year 11 is 2%, and declining. And in here in year even year 11, 2%, and then 1% in year 16.
So, Bassem, if you sum those as you go year 1 through year 12, say, what percent of homes turn over, would you say?
50%. I think he's used the number based on my Excel. So yes, around 50% would be turnover.
Yeah, that would definitely help us.
It's qua numbers, and I see it declining well rapidly. So I need some explanation. I don't know what that's supposed.
The problem you run into here is that you only accumulate for the first set of house in the first year, right?
Sorry.
So what you're seeing right now is the first group of homeowners who join us in the first year, which is why the percentage peak, and half of them will sell at the 11-year marks, and then it eventually dying down. But then you got in those turn, the second year you got another group coming, the third year we got another group coming. You see, so what the first chart only shows one group. That is the initial groups that we're serving. I believe the second chart can be used to express our total sales per year. Right now, it's only half the first year or first group of customer sale per year.
Yes, I'm talking about this area. It's C area. It's C region.
Yeah, right now.
Okay. So, and these two charts are identical. The blue area is the same blue area, but alone with a trend. That it was this one was interesting to me, and I need to ask you about it.
The chart is functioned the way it's supposed to be, because as you can see, that's the chart only saw again the first. Those probabilities applies to the first year. The second groups now, on the second year they join, they will have also the similar charts. Right. So basically, it's this probability chart, but one move over.
Right.
So it's get accumulated.
It's from year 1 to 60. Are you?
So from
Is
year
that,
1 to 60, the first chart is applied to the first year's, the first set of plans. I don't know that you, maybe someone else can explain it better to me, to you, but that's what that probability's percentage is.
Sorry, Quad. Can you help me understand? Are you saying that there's a part of this that we need to revise, or are you interpreting what's been shared in terms of the implications of it?
I'm explaining the visualization. So to Pasem, because he's asking the question of explaining why is this decreasing right here,
yes,
but why are we gaining more money over time? So
yes,
just to reiterate my points, this chart is great. It's showing the probabilities. It's showing that probability to the first set of homeowners. So every year we get new set of homes of clients in it. Okay, those clients will not sell on the first year all the property. That 100 house that we got in the first year will sell over times. Again, the second year we got another 120 house into the model. So those 120 house on their set on the second years of the company operations,
Right,
it is their first year of entering the model.
right.
So those 120 house, we have 1% chance of sale. So the chart right now is showing a portion of the story. The chart is explaining to everyone else that, hey, this is what we expect. The first group of owners, how fast are they gonna sell? How fast our asset turnover for that first group of homeowners? Now we have to show that, all right, when the second group come in, how is it gonna impact the charts?
Right, and if we took this chart, Bassem, and we took years 0 through 10, and we divided them up into 10 years, and we started this chart over each year, and then could somehow read transparently through the start at each year, so that you could start year 2, start year 3, and sum through them. You asked the question, why was there this increase in value? It's because you're increasing the portfolio of homes. Am I not right, Hua?
Yes, you increase the number of homes, but also that increase in number of home have that accumulative powers on that probability charts.
Right.
So instead of it decreasing, well, the probability that is decreasing for the first group house. Let's say if you models, instead of using, well, in addition to using that probability chart, you would also use, let me see what numbers would be good for you to model it out.
I can stop broadcasting now.
Any other questions for Bassem before? Oh, he's taking off. Before Bassem takes this off the screen, I just wanted to understand this other chart that you've got. Is this is 100% cap? What do you mean by 100% cap, Bassem?
It's Qua. This is titled by Qua.
I can help answer that. So 100% cap includes all the homes accumulated till that year. So for example, if we see at the top chart at year 5, 100% cap line is different than the yellow line. Yellow line is for the probability of the sale of, so the blue line gained by probability of home sale is for home sale if it is purchased at year 1. And the yellow is cumulative sale for all the homes purchased from year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 if we are looking at homes being sold till year 5. Am I in the right direction?
Yes, and I also understand the dip in there. That dip in there because it's due to we are increasing the caps. So at around the 6 year
Oh.
mark, I believe that we are not only issue 25% of the house anymore. We're now moving toward the 50%.
I
So
see.
which
So
is why
that's
we
where
started
the change connects.
yeah.
So let me ask Ninad, what Bassem has done and what you have done. Can we bridge these two processes, or how do we describe the overlap or connection between the two?
We can. I just want to make sure if this is a generalized probability, or do we have like different set of probabilities for the area we are concentrating on, or or is it like metropolitans and non-metropolitan cities in US? I'm asking this because when I was doing my research, I found that the areas, Bay Area, Seattle, and New York, those are the trend they are following is different than the national average trend.
Right. We're
And
trying to
that's why.
talk about the Bay Area, Seattle, New York type
Yes.
trend.
So if we
not-
can get those trends instead of the US general trend, that would be very appreciated.
Yes.
I try to do that, but I don't have the data. I don't know where to get the data.
Yeah, and it's not easy. It's not at all easy to get data for the specific regions that we are looking for. So,
Looking at those.
so if we don't find those specific ones, we can work with this generalized trend.
Where is it? So, Pasem, if you are opening up the models right now, 3 columns to the left, to the right of that probability of sales is what we call the annual, what I call annual sale revenue multipliers. So go a little bit to the left, and you will see the probability to the left.
Annual what?
Where is that probability? Oh, stop there. So what you can model in addition to that probability of home sale in column N is column Q. Column Q's now accumulate also probability of sales along with any new house that join into the models. You see, the first year we got 10%, but then the second year now we got that's 3% plus extra from another groups that coming in.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah, that's I don't know how I come up with that formulas, but
So I guess the question I have is, how do the different modeling pieces that we're doing through data science and through finance, can we map the models that we've done and how those maps relate to the roadmap we were discussing at the beginning?
I believe what Pasem is modeling.
You
Is
said you
going to
believe what he's modeling. Go ahead.
what he's modeling right now is a different approach to seeing the Excel. So
Yes.
when we present this to third parties, they want to see our Excel, of course. They want to see how it works, but they also want to have a general view of how our model works. And I believe what Hassan have right now is what they can see. They can see an overall a visualization of the models, how it works, without going through each of the sales that we're talking about. They can see that, hey, we are actually we're actually growing over times. For the investor, hey, we are serving more house. For the one that looking for a profit, hey, our return on shares is actually 2 to 4% or whatever percentage is based on the parameters that we set at the time. So the Power BI, the visualization is another tool that we can share to third parties. Say, hey, look at this. It's easier to look than go to the Excels.
Got it. So, in terms of what this connects together, Ninad, what do you think of the roadmap from here?
For the roadmap, I believe one is we can connect this visual Bassem has created with the area charts for the 3 regions, and we can also discuss on what additional research we would require so that we can incorporate and reach the minimum viable product. And I am also looking at storing data online where we can easily connect to it, and whoever is taking a look at the dashboard, they can connect to the most recent data.
Got it. And I'm wondering whether Tuka and Jenna, do y'all see the roadmap that we've discussed here today connecting together into something where we could summarize that and be able to navigate to that? I know some colleagues would, I think, find it helpful to be able to know where they can connect to what we're up to with this. And I'm just thinking about how we map this, like map the data gaps, map the technical integrations, map the gap between here and MVP, and then include colleagues in that journey.
Yeah, I think, is it possible to just get a kind of quick narrative of it? Because from my understanding, it's the different data points that I guess Sam has, and integrating that into the model, right, that currently exists. Is that my understanding? Is that correct?
Kwa, do you want to speak to your perspective on that?
Sorry, can you say the question one more time?
Yeah, so what Sam showed, is that what we're trying to connect to the model that you've created and we're working on Tuesdays?
Mm-hmm. So,
or is that the scenario analysis point of it? Again, I could be understanding it incorrectly, but
that is not a scenario analysis point of it. It's a visualization of the models at its current point.
Yeah, yeah.
However, Power BI do have something that, well, I would say exactly the same thing.
Yeah, because I guess what we're right now doing is one scenario, and then I think you're saying there's an MVP point that we get to where we can see a number of scenarios all at the same time and see how those scenarios connect together to make a compelling case for this approach.
Yes, and I believe at that point, the scenario analysis, it can either be Excel or Power BI, depending on our skill.
So, okay, so there's a technical roadmap, it sounds like. But Sam and Ninad and Sue, are y'all in alignment on the technical roadmap for that part?
I think from my viewpoint, I think we're looking at, and Ninad or Sam, correct me, getting out a good kind of database source that we can have out there that we can all work from that has the data we need.
Right, and I think that goes back to Ninad's question about where will we find that data if it's hard to find it for dense urban areas. But the model that we're working on, Ninad, supposes that the job creation exceeds housing creation and that the geography of the area is bounded by natural features such that that trend of job creation exceeding housing creation is going to drive the appreciation value of the home. And what we're trying to do is to call attention to the fact that in these specific types of neighborhoods, for over 25 years, there's been appreciation at rates that make the appreciation value itself in an investment. So does that make sense why we're focusing on those areas? And if you're having trouble finding data, I think that the National Association of Realtors and other websites may give you some long-term data to fall back on.
Well, for the actual like median value of houses, for Zillow, it goes back to 1996. And this
I take 20 years, yeah.
Yeah, so you can get all the way, you can look specifically at these 3 cities that you're looking at for that one thing, because there's a whole lot of other things you're going to want, but I would say for that one data point.
Do we have a better location to identify the probability of a home being sold?
Well, I have a general idea where it is. It will cost you some money to get there. I don't know if Crown doing some sponsoring out or something.
But in other
National.
words, you're saying how likely the home is to be sold. I mean, the data that we have about that is not necessarily a good guidance. I mean, in the sense that Stanford professors keep their home if they have the right home for life in most cases. You know, in other words, in other words, the whole point of this model is we are not making it operate from the speed at which there's transactions. We are not predicating it on how fast people turn over their homes. We are not requiring people to go sell their home every 5 or 10 years so that our model works. We are trying to make this liquidatable through a holdco structure so that every stakeholder can align their financing with their needs and constraints and intentions. So this is an agency compatible financing if we can make that feasible. So, Zakai, do you have feedback on what you've heard today? Questions, commentary?
I was just wondering about the scenario analysis. So do you think it's better to get more data, so to change the parameters and to see how the model performs? Or what is the better way to do the scenario analysis? Do we need to incorporate additional assumptions into the model, or just wondering about it?
I mean, I think there's scenarios that are global and there's scenarios that are specific, right? One type of scenario is we have this kind of macro change in the housing context, like 2008 crisis happens again, or 2001 crisis happens again, or etc. The other is we have a narrowing of this in terms of some zip codes, for example, such as saying these 75% of the zip codes in the region are included, these 25% are excluded because we think appreciation value is long-term valid over the last 25 years in these zip codes, but not those. Mark and I think, have reason to assume that the whole region has this kind of dynamic in terms of housing prices over time. However, Mark and my assumption, while worthwhile as an intuition, is going to need to be validated by evidence if we're going to get the capital to flow at the scale it would need to prevent this kind of poverty and this kind of homelessness. So it's not enough for us to have good intuitions about it. That's enough for us to have a thesis that's where we know what is validatable, but we still need to get the evidence built up right. Mark, are there other assumption categories that we should flag before we adjourn here?
No, I think this is plenty to get a pretty robust picture. What I appreciate about Bassem's graphics is just being a visual person. When I look at Bois' spreadsheets, I see trends, but there's something about, for instance, if I were to take the first year's spreadsheet, and I tried to write this in the chat, if I take the first year's spreadsheet and I see that trend, I would never understand that valley after year 5 having to do with our overall business plan saying, okay, we'll allow you to buy in at, you pay for 75% of the home, we'll pay, and that shift because of an accumulation in the hold company over the 5-6 years, that suddenly all of a sudden it makes a difference in the portrayal in the spreadsheet that I didn't see until visually I saw it in Bassem's chart graph of the same Excel spreadsheet, but it was invisible to me. So no, I think we've got, and I'd love other people's comments on this, but I think we're getting closer to seeing the dynamics of how this thing might perform. The question I have in the real world for Bobby and me is how, if it's almost impossible to buy a home now, I mean, and I literally know this, it's almost impossible.
Almost impossible to buy a home because of the pandemic?
No, because the real estate in the entire Bay Area is so tight. It's very, very difficult to acquire a single firearm. No, it really hasn't, Bobby. I'm talking about people who go in with all cash offers and can't buy a home because the asking price is exceeded by 10 to 20% by somebody else who's bringing an all cash offer. The jobs and the ability, what the pandemic has done is made whole new areas of real estate purchase available to people who otherwise wouldn't have been even looking there. So it's infinitely more difficult to buy a home in Santa Cruz today than it was even 2 years ago, and it was hard then. What I'm saying, what I'm getting at is if you want to launch a 100 home portfolio, you probably need to buy it as a portfolio. So you need to buy it from a group who scored big in 2008 and bought several thousand houses in the Bay Area and is willing to sell you 100 of them all at once.
Well, I mean, look, I mean, the article right here says that at every point there is 45,000, according to the San Jose Mercury News, which is not an infinitely reliable source, but they say 46,000 homes unoccupied at any given time over the last 20 years, that there's always more than 45,000 homes for sale at any given moment, according to...
Well, wait a minute. Unoccupied and for sale are two different things. Which is it?
Well, the Mercury News one is conflating them, so let's figure it out.
Well, that's my reason for asking, because there's a lot of speculation and a lot of condominiums, and now, you know, where people thought they were going to do them as Airbnb, there are
46,000 vacant homes, according to ABC News in the Bay Area.
Right, and
So
I'm telling you, yeah, and I'm telling you, a lot of those are definitely owned, and they're pied-à-terres or investments by wealthy people who don't live in the Bay Area, but who are making money on the appreciation at Bobby, as you know, the appreciation value of those homes. They have nothing to lose. They're just balancing their portfolios by investing in residences. And I'm not saying all of them are like that, but I'm guessing that there's a percentage that are like that. We'd have to go back to the Mercury News and ask them to sharpen their, not conflate them and sharpen that.
Well, according to this article, there's 100% rise in Bay Area listings post-pandemic, and in vacancies a corresponding increase, but that there's not necessarily the same in Seattle. We're assuming that Seattle, Bay Area, and New York all have the same financeability of this. The data's got to bear that out, but that's our working assumption.
And I'll tell you what I think that dynamic's got to do with. It's simply got to do with people who were sharing homes, paying a lot of rent for homes, paying big mortgages, who began because of the pandemic and their companies need to continue to do business without bringing people into office buildings. They've started to do virtual commutes, and they've gotten out of situations that have otherwise just meant that they were paying for homes that were in locations that they no longer needed.
Yeah, I think it's real, but I think this is also going to be a one-year aberration to these processes, and the same homelessness creation processes that have happened before are going to be creating a lot of damage next year and the next 20 years unless we do something about it. So I think this is still a path that's feasible. Tuka, does this all sound good to you in terms of coordinating with colleagues? Anything else before we adjourn? Is that good?
No, I think it's good. And if I have any questions when we meet on Tuesday, I think we'll also be able to ask some of those as well.
Terrific.
Don't hesitate. Yeah.
Don't
hesitate. No, just don't hesitate to ask any questions, because it'll get us to be more explicit or think something through, or, you know, find more data, or yeah, just ask away.
I concur. Nina, are you unmuted? Did you want to say something before we adjourn?
I had one question, Bobby. So if we are looking at any solutions to like for say business visualization or storing data, and if they are not available for free, then what would be
Well, we
our
have there
budget?
are nonprofit requests from some of these places. So
Okay.
for some of these, we can request a nonprofit free access. So
okay.
it depends on what's available. If you want to start an email chain with me offline, I'm happy to collaborate on the process of applying for a nonprofit license from any of these sources.
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks so much, y'all, for collaborating on homelessness prevention and supercommuting prevention, zero subsidy affordable housing at CrowdDoing. I really appreciate your patience through this process. It's complex. I'd like to wish y'all a terrific Sunday. Take care, y'all.
Thank you, Bobby.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.